Today, we're digging into something pretty significant, maybe even a bit unexpected on the global stage. India's making a strategic move, and it looks like it's aimed right at, well, what's often called Turkey's weakest geopolitical spot. We're talking about the island nation of Cyprus.
That's right. Prime Minister Modi's recent visit there wasn't just your standard diplomatic trip. It's being framed, quite strongly actually, as a calculated, let's say, blow towards Turkey.
Exactly. So, our mission today: cut through the headlines, give you that shortcut to really understanding what's going on. We'll unpack the history, the strategy, maybe some surprising details that make Cyprus, this small island, such a key player in this unfolding drama.
It really is fascinating, isn't it, how these um, seemingly localized issues, like the division of Cyprus has been going on for decades,
Yeah.
how they can suddenly become these really potent leverage points in, bigger international games.
Yeah.
So we'll explore that history, the roots of the tension, and figure out exactly why India coming out so openly for Cyprus is making Ankara, well, nervous.
Okay, so let's set the scene. PM Modi was on a three-country tour. First stop, Cyprus, then Croatia, then Canada for the G7 summit, where India was a special guest, by the way.
Right, the G7 being, the big advanced economies.
Mm-hmm.
But it's that first stop, Cyprus. That's the one sending the clear signal, the direct challenge to Turkey.
Why is Cyprus considered Turkey's weak spot, geopolitically speaking?
Well, it consistently comes up. Analysts point to it as Turkey's weakest geopolitical aspect.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that India, which is, a major rising power, has now offered such open, unequivocal support, that's definitely causing jitters in Turkey. It signals a real shift, potentially.
A shift with maybe long-term consequences for Turkey's goals.
Precisely.
And you mentioned India being provoked. There's a specific reason, a backstory involving Turkey and Pakistan.
Right. So the natural question is, why is India doing this now? What's the immediate grievance? Well, it circles back to an incident during a natural disaster. India had offered help, but then Turkey supplied 72 drones to Pakistan.
Yep.
Now, according to Indian sources, the major concern there was that these drones could potentially be used against civilian targets.
I see.
India says its response was effective. They apparently shot down quite a few of these Turkish drones. And interestingly, if you look at some defense analyses floating around, there's this perspective emerging that India's air defense systems are, well, pretty robust. Some commentators even suggest they perhaps perform better than, say, what was observed with Israel's defenses against recent missile attacks, which reportedly did cause, significant damage in some areas.
That's quite a claim about the air defenses. And the drone usage accusation is serious. Has Turkey responded to that specifically, or is it just framed as, supporting an ally?
Turkey generally frames these things, publicly at least, as part of their, well, broader alliances and supporting partners like Pakistan. Strategic interests. They don't typically engage directly with India's specific framing of the accusations, not in the same way India presents it.
Right. And you can imagine, back in India, this drone issue, Turkey's actions, it had a real impact.
Led to boycotts, right? Turkish goods, services.
Absolutely, widespread boycotts, and even prominent figures like the Bollywood actor Amir Khan. He'd previously met President Erdogan, but now reports say he supports the boycott. It shows how public feeling can, really influence things.
Definitely. So, okay, India's motivation seems clearer now, but let's zoom in on Cyprus itself. The island, south of Turkey, west of India, geographically important. But why is it divided? What's the story there?
It's a complicated history, but the key event is the 1974 invasion. Turkey, which is a NATO member, invaded Cyprus and occupied about 37% of the island.
37%. Wow.
Yeah. And then Turkey unilaterally set up this separate entity in the north, calling it Northern Cyprus. They cited religious and ethnic reasons for the Muslim Turkish Cypriot population there.
But nobody else recognizes this Northern Cyprus. Only Turkey. That's the crucial point. The UN, the EU, basically the entire international community, they don't recognize it as a sovereign state. The consensus is for one single united Cyprus.
And the population mix.
Looking at data from around 2010, the total population was roughly 1.34 million. Demographically, it breaks down to about, say, 75% Christian and maybe 25–30% Muslim.
And Modi actually went to the dividing line during his visit.
Yes, he visited the border, the buffer zone, separating the two parts. Showed a lot of interest, apparently. Reports say he was even shown the fake flag, as some call it, of Northern Cyprus, really highlighting that division.
So this small divided island, how does it manage to have so much influence over a regional power like Turkey?
Ah, well, that's where the European Union comes in.
Okay.
Turkey has wanted to join the EU for a very, very long time. It's a major strategic goal.
Right. Access to the Schengen zone, easier travel, economic ties.
Exactly. Passport-free travel in the Schengen area,
Mhm.
more freedom, deeper integration into Europe. It's tied to their whole vision of their place in the world.
But Cyprus is already in the EU.
Precisely. And as an EU member, Cyprus has veto power over new members joining,
Mm.
and they have repeatedly used that power to block Turkey's accession process.
So Cyprus is essentially holding the key.
In many ways, yes. It's become Turkey's biggest geopolitical headache, as it's often described. It forces the EU to confront the Cyprus problem every time Turkey's membership comes up.
Is it an absolute block? Like, is there any condition under which Cyprus would say yes? Or is it purely about reunification?
Historically, Cyprus has been very clear. The main condition is a resolution to the division. That generally means the withdrawal of Turkish troops and agreement on a framework for United Cyprus recognized internationally. So yeah, it's fundamentally tied to solving that core issue of the island's division. Other EU factors might play a role in the background, but Cyprus's veto is laser focused on this.
Understood. So given this leverage, and India now stepping in,
Yeah.
how did Cyprus react to Modi's visit? What are they hoping to get out of this?
Oh, they rolled out the red carpet. A truly grand welcome. The Cypriot president himself met Modi at the airport. That's not always standard protocol.
Really?
Yeah. And then there's this quite symbolic moment. A Cypriot member of parliament actually touched PM Modi's feet, which is, a traditional Indian sign of deep respect, usually for elders or revered figures. Seeing it on the international stage like that was quite
That's
something.
anything can't.
Definitely shows the warmth, the deference they wanted to convey. And they immediately gave Modi their highest civilian honor, the Order of Macarius III.
So beyond the symbolism, what's the calculation for Cyprus?
Well, it seems quite pragmatic. They see India as a potentially very important partner. Why? Because from their perspective, India now has its own reasons to, let's say, teach Turkey a lesson for interfering in its affairs, like with the drones for Pakistan. And that aligns perfectly with Cyprus's own long-standing issues with Turkey.
So a convergence of interests. Are there specifics they're hoping for? Military cooperation, maybe?
Yes, definitely. Deep in defense engagement is high on the list. Specifically, there's talk about Cyprus potentially acquiring BrahMos missiles from India.
BrahMos, those are the supersonic cruise missiles, right? Developed with Russia.
That's the one. Renowned for speed, precision. And the strategic thinking here is significant. Many analyses suggest that Turkey, and frankly other countries in that immediate region, don't currently have the really high-end air defense systems like, say, Russia's S-500 or the top-tier American systems needed to reliably counter BrahMos.
So getting BrahMos would be a major capability boost for Cyprus, and a deterrent.
A very potent deterrent, exactly. And beyond missiles, Cyprus obviously wants India's continued strong support in international forums like the UN, pushing for that United Cyprus solution.
And India's official line remains firm on that?
Absolutely clear. India believes in one Cyprus, full stop, no recognition of Northern Cyprus.
And that puts India alongside.
Pretty much the rest of the world, the US, China, Russia, the EU, almost everyone except Turkey itself holds that position. So India isn't breaking new ground diplomatically, but the emphasis and the timing of this visit, the first by a leader of such an important country in quite a while, that's what matters.
It certainly seems calculated to get Turkey's attention.
Oh, undoubtedly. Given the history, the current tensions, the explicit nature of the support, you'd have to expect some kind of reaction from Turkey fairly soon. This visit definitely puts them on notice.
So stepping back, this deep dive really underscores how interconnected everything is. Old conflicts, historical grievances, they don't just disappear, they can suddenly flare up and reshape today's alliances and strategies. And it shows how even smaller nations like Cyprus can wield surprising influence if the circumstances are right.
It really does. And, if we connect this to the bigger picture, it kind of raises a broader question, doesn't it? In this current global environment where major powers are always looking for leverage against their rivals, how many other unresolved conflicts, maybe historical disputes that have been simmering for years, could suddenly be, weaponized or activated by new alliances looking for an edge?
Like pulling old levers for new purposes makes you wonder what other fault lines might become active.
Exactly. It's something to think about.
Definitely food for thought. So turning it over to you, our listener, what stands out to you about how these past actions, these historical layers, continue to shape the geopolitical map we see today?